This is RiverTalks with Jonathan Brush, President and CEO of Unbound.
As the introduction says, I am the president and CEO of Unbound. That is one of the most amazing privileges of my life. And so I'm thankful for that every day. I get to work with an absolutely amazing team and an absolutely phenomenal group of students. And for the next couple of podcasts, I want to talk a little bit about the promises that Unbound attempts to deliver on, not because I'm necessarily recording this as a bunch of advertisements for Unbound, although I'm absolutely delighted if it actually works that way, but because the promises that we're going to talk about here are things derived from years of watching young adults transition from, as I put it, sleeping on their own couches, sleeping on their parents' couches to sleeping on their own couches. And so these promises are random. They weren't derived because of marketing polls or a focus group. They came from myself and our staff observing what are the things that make students thrive. What are the things that happen that allow students to do better than their peers in living everyday life, not in terms of living better in everyday life, in terms of being rich, famous, or powerful, but in terms of actually living full, enriching, blessed lives where they make a positive impact on their community, and they would describe their own lives as exciting and interesting and fun, and that they have purpose and all those kinds of things. So in the next couple of podcasts, I want to go through some of the things that we talk about there and break them down because I think they're important, regardless of whether you have any interest in Unbound. I hope you do. But because they come from a deep sense of having observed things and seeing what makes a difference. And the first thing we say is that this just very first question here, what exactly should an education be or do? And it's not so much an education, but education is so often, and I've spoken about this in other podcasts, is so often a stand-in for this transition to being an adult. We think that we know instinctively deep down that it is absolutely essential that our children transition from sleeping on our couch to sleeping on their own couch. In other words, that they go from being dependent to being independent, that they move into the adult world. And I would say that they are young adults and they become full adults, fully independent, meaning that they have the ability to take care of themselves, make their own decisions, make their way in the world, create value, all those kinds of things. And so what we say is we want that to happen. And so anymore, for strange reasons that are myriad and historical and all kinds of things, parents now have this kind of lack of confidence. And I think that that's somewhat rooted in the fact that we no longer have a community that tends to support us in this, that we have a lack of understanding as a community, as a group, as a society, as a culture about what it actually means to become an adult. And so consequently, the shorthand here and the shortcut is that we say, well, becoming an adult is when you finish your education. It could be when you finish high school. For most people, it'd say when we finish college. And it's somewhere magically between, the beginning of high school and the graduation of either high school or college, that one of those graduation ceremonies, the child walks across the stage and becomes an adult. And they have all the skills they need to be a successful adult and to be able to make their way in the world. Now, that is haphazard at best. It's certainly true that lots of young adults are able to become full adults after they graduate, and that graduation marks a turning point in their life and a transition point, and they step into the new responsibilities. And so that certainly is the case in many places and ways, and so that's fine as far as it goes. But it's also true that that's not the case in many places and ways, and that somebody who graduates from college is not necessarily fully equipped to become an adult operating independently in the world. And so certainly lots of examples of that. And so there has to be something more, and there has to be something else to be examined here, which is what do we mean by success? And so often, and again, I've referred to this in other podcasts, when I talk to people, they're talking about their child becoming an adult, and they define that as becoming successful. And if you press them on what success is, they kind of flounder around a little bit, and then they ultimately come out with some version of being rich, famous, or powerful. They don't say it that way. They say it in terms of like, well, they get a good job, well, they make a good salary. That's the rich part. And they're not saying that they become Bill Gates. They're just saying that, they make money and maybe more than I made or more than average. That would be a definition of success. Or when they mean powerful, they mean that they would be somebody who'd be respected in their community, that they would have a position of influence, that people would look to them and see that there was some sort of prestige that came with their position in society. Most often is defined through their position in the place that they work and their employment. And so, they would say, well, they would have a good job or they can make a difference in the world. That would be the way that's often portrayed. And then there's an aspect of being famous. And again, this sort of bleeds into not so much that we want somebody to, be a rock star or something like that, but we say, we want our child to be known. And as parents, there's some aspect of selfishness here that I want to be able to say, hey, that's my kid. that's my son, that's my daughter, and there's a reflection aspect of that there. And so there's an aspect of if our kids could have a good job and be respected in their community and be known, have some aspect where people look to them and admired them, that we would think that they had been successful. And I'm not so sure that those things are wrong in its entirety, and maybe even, and there's certainly parts of it that are really true. It's just that those things become really hard to nail down. And so we end up chasing almost ghosts, or we end up chasing the wrong thing. We end up chasing this idea of being rich, famous, or powerful when we really want something different. I think we want our students, or we want our children to be able to thrive. And what does it mean to thrive? Well, just that word itself means that they're doing better than average, that they are fully alive and fully awake, that they're able to use the gifts that they've been given, and they're able to influence people around them, and that they have a joy and a zest and excitement about life. And I think that any parent, if asked that question, would say, yes, if that would happen, that's what I want for my child. And so in the next couple of podcasts, I want to break apart a little bit about what Unbound thinks it means to thrive.